very much, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. I think that I am probably a very strange participant on this panel. My own work has been on a whole host of issues related to political economy, Asian regionalism, security, and I've not done much at all on the metropolitan areas. So I feel very honored to be here. It's like coming to the Olympics, but I feel like I qualified as a marathoner and I'm being asked to compete in the pistol shoot. So I know which direction the target is, but I'm not sure I'm going to hit very much. Basically, let me start with a couple of very broad points, but metropolitan areas, as I'm sure everyone knows, do generate the majority of economic activity due to the on-the-ground interactions among business people and governments. Metropolitan areas offer large labor markets, incredible public infrastructure, deep pools of consumers. Firms profit from their close proximity to one another. That spurs innovation, higher productivity, and area population growth results in much more than a proportional growth in output, patents, bank deposits, and the like. Metropolitan East Asia, as I'm sure many of you know, is the home to 4 of the world's 10 richest cities by total production, Tokyo, Seoul, Osaka, and Shanghai. In the 24 metropolitan areas in developing Asia Pacific account for 64% of their country's total population and GDP. The 18 large metro areas in developing Asian countries produce almost a quarter. So the point of this is simply to say that the metropolitan areas are really at the heart of Asian economic development. This is simply a quick shot of the GDP of these major areas. The same is true of China. All 12 Chinese metropolitan areas are among the world's 200 largest, as they're ranked from Shanghai at number 1 to Zhangjiang at number 35. And these areas contribute incredibly to the gains in output and employment in recent years. This is just a graphic on the employment for developing and developed East Asia, but the point again is this has been very critical. The point I want to make, and that the bridge to my own research, is that I think these metropolitan areas in East Asia have been very critical to at least 3 very important areas. The first is regional economic growth and development. Second, to regional institution building. And third, to cultural development and cultural exchanges across the region. And basically, all of these regional areas and the regional economic story in East Asia has benefited from, but it's also contributed to, the reduced security tensions across the region. Basically, a point that I tend to make is that the political and the metropolitan leaders across East Asia draw their legitimacy on the basis of economic development rather than on the basis of military power, and that this has been very conducive to the overall story of East Asia. Again, East Asia, as many of you know, is really moving forward as a result of the development of regional production networks, so that the story is that you move the product rather than moving the factory. And we have a number of these connections: Shanghai to Taipei, Hong Kong with Guangzhou, Tokyo, Seoul, Beijing. And basically, there's a great deal of cross-border collaboration among some of the major metropolitan areas in the region. This really just shows the increased foreign direct investment and increased interdependence of trade across the Asian region. Foreign direct investment flowing into China, again, a very familiar story. Much of this money coming from the rest of East Asia. And within Northeast Asia, intra-regional trade has jumped tremendously, particularly since the financial crisis of 1997-98. And we've seen a huge rise in intra-regional trade, with East Asia now closing in on the European Union in terms of the proportion of total trade that is carried out within East Asia. This has been benefited by the number of concluded free trade agreements across the region. Virtually all of the countries in the region have begun a systematic advancement of foreign direct of free trade agreements to enhance their links to one another. So that's part one of the story. Metropolitan areas at the heart of this economic development. The second story is the development of East Asian institutions. Many of these are very familiar to you. It sounds like an alphabet soup, but APEC, ASEAN Regional Forum, ASEAN, etc. The East Asia Summit, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but basically all of these have developed a rich set of regional institutions that allow for cooperation and interaction among the various governments of the region on a host of issues, and they tend to overlap and intersect with one another. The ASEAN Plus 3 has been very instrumental in linking the financial parts of the region, including the Chiang Mai Initiative, which has now become multilateral, multinational, and they have this has been a very expanding process with 2012 culminating in the multilateralization of Chiang Mai, and now where there's one large pool of money that all of these areas can tap into. A very interesting compromise in the balance of contributions, with Japan contributing 32% to this, China plus Hong Kong contributing 32%. So China can claim that it's the #1 donor. Japan can claim it's the #1 donor if it discounts Hong Kong, and this was an arrangement that was worked out by South Korea, which managed to bring these two countries together in a cooperative venture. China has, of course, been very instrumental in moving this regional agenda forward. It's been very active in the participation of Track 1 and Track 2 activities, the ASEAN Regional Forum, Chiang Mai Initiative, CSCAP, Northeast Asia Cooperation Dialogue, etc. They've been very active and participatory with Southeast Asia. Also took a large role in the six-party talks. And one of the most recent and potentially very powerful ways to link the region has been with the trilateral meetings, the heads of state of China, South Korea, and Japan, meeting since 2008 outside the ASEAN Plus 3. Lots of promises for future cooperation, including a headquarters and a secretariat based in Seoul. And they have agreed to a common investment treaty that advances their regional links. And right now there's a trilateral free trade agreement being discussed, but it's been basically on hold. But that's a picture. These are the nested institutions across the region, very complicated. Some countries in 6 or 8 overlapping institutions and then not participating in several others. But this is the second part of the story, this rapid development of institutions. Finally, the third part of the story is the metropolitan areas as the heart of the cultural cooperation or public diplomacy or sports diplomacy, popular culture. The Korea-Japan World Cup 2002, height of cooperation between Tokyo and Seoul, although lots of disagreements as to whether it was the Korea-Japan World Cup or the Japan-Korea World Cup. Each country put its own country first whenever it put up posters. Tokyo was also at the heart of what came to be called gross national cool, export of manga, anime, karaoke, J-pop, Pokemon, etc. So Japan was pursuing soft power for a long period of time, including the films of Miyazaki, and these were very popular across Asia. Pokemon, of course, most of your kids are probably very familiar with it. Seoul was very instrumental to the development of K-pop. Yonsama fan clubs were in Japan. Lots of middle-aged women following Mr. Yon around and throwing clothes at him. China, of course, was very instrumental in pursuing a charm offensive led primarily by Tokyo, but led by Beijing, but also by Shanghai. Lots of Chinese acrobats and so forth moving across the region. And of course, Beijing was at the heart of the Olympics of 2008, all of these sort of a third part of the story of the metropolitan areas pulling the region together in cooperative ventures and bringing them closer together. And the popular culture has consistently moved across borders as various products from Hello Kitty or Super Junior have become really popular throughout. And we've seen the development of China-Japan economic ties as China has replaced the United States as the major trade partner for both South Korea and Japan. And basically, these bilateral relationships have developed in ways that pull the countries together in cooperative ways. But then we get to a very complicating situation with the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands. There was a long-standing dispute, of course, about the sovereignty of these islands, but until about 2010 or 2012, the status quo remained in place and there were no serious tensions that were driving this to become an issue. 2012, the situation changed, and here it seems to me that we have a situation in which a metropolitan leader has gone out of his way to cause trouble. There had been mutual conflict management. Deng Xiaoping basically said it's time to let the next generation worry about these. It doesn't matter whether this is shelved for some time, 10 years or others. Both Japan and China took active measures to prevent this from becoming a crisis, preventing landings, preventing any group actions, etc. And things were very quiet until the confrontation in 2010, when a Chinese fishing vessel rammed Japanese Coast Guard vessels. The captain, in a break from previous arrangements, was arrested and was charged according to Japanese law. This led to huge protests in China. China responded strongly with a cutoff of rare earth disputes, rare earth exports, held 4 Japanese business leaders, and Japan backed off and eventually released the captain. Things quieted for 2 years, but then we got the injection of Tokyo Governor Ishihara Shintaro. He basically used his mayoralty to what he called change Japan, starting with Tokyo. He was the man who wrote the book, Japan That Can Say No to the United States. He had a long history of anti-China statements, very socially conservative, very anti-immigrant, very anti-foreign, and as I'm sure many of you know, Ishihara basically announced in April of 2012 that he would purchase the islands that were then held by a private owner, private Japanese owner, and the implication was that he would use those islands to land Tokyo citizens, set up flags, set up public displays in an effort to provoke China, and was anxious to embarrass the existing Japanese government in the process. Interestingly, Prime Minister Noda thought he was carrying out a very sensible way to reduce conflicts and insisted on the national government buying these islands from the private owners. But in the process, the central government basically triggered a protest from China because by nationalizing the islands, by purchasing the islands for the government from a private owner, that would add to Japan's claims to sovereignty. China felt itself required to respond to the Japanese sale, and this basically has triggered anti-Japanese demonstrations, numerous confrontations in the islands, including Taiwan. This is a very interesting shot of what the ocean can look like when vessels are trying to dance with each other. Recently there's been a back-off in the tensions. Chinese penetration of the area has gone down rather systematically since October of 2013, although in the last couple of weeks, apparently Chinese vessels have increased their number of visits to the area. But this has been basically something that has led to a reduction in the economic ties between the two countries, and a pullback from Japanese firms opting to invest in China. And unfortunately, the current Prime Minister of Japan is in a very weak position to try to revive either China-Japan ties or Japan's ties with the rest of the region. He's a hyper-nationalist, been a harsh critic of China, very unsympathetic to North Korea, and basically Japan's relations with both China and South Korea have become very sour. There's been a big drop in regional cooperation, and just as one indication, South Korea's views of the neighborhood are very clearly anti-Japanese and rising. One of the most interesting things is that Prime Minister Abe is now less popular than Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, so that indicates a high level of unpopularity. And so, in conclusion, I think my central point is that metropolitan areas have been at the heart of East Asia's economic success. The economic success of East Asia lies in their metropolitan areas and the connection that they have to one another. That's been boosted by institutional developments, and the regional climate had been very good until the outbreak of tensions, particularly around the island dispute. But these, in many respects, have exacerbated the tensions, and we now face a very difficult security situation. So the one lesson I would offer to metropolitan leaders is that they should continue to focus their attention on the promotion of economics, popular culture, cooperation, and development of their metropolitan areas, and stay out of foreign policy areas. Thank you.